The fluorescent hum of the Innovatech Solutions headquarters in downtown Seattle was a constant, low thrum, a silent symphony to the relentless pursuit of technological advancement. For most, it signaled innovation, progress, the future. For Jonathan John Reed, however, a man of 40 with eyes that held the quiet weight of countless secrets, it was simply the backdrop to his meticulously crafted anonymity. He moved through the deserted hallways long after the last of the tech whizzes had left, a ghost in a beige jumpsuit, pushing his cleaning cart with the deliberate, almost meditative pace of someone who understood every inch of the labyrinthine building. He was, to the casual observer, just a janitor, another anonymous cog in the corporate machine. Yet, his movements weren't those of indifference. His gaze wasn't vacant. It swept over every desk, every darkened monitor, every shadowy corner with the practiced precision of a hawk, missing nothing. He was searching, always searching, for something he couldn't yet define but knew, with a primal certainty, was there. His routine was a precise, unvarying ritual. Midnight coffee, black as tar, brewed in a chipped mug from the staff kitchen. A simple while bland meal, usually a protein bar and an apple, consumed alone in the cramped janitorial supply closet. Its scent of bleach and floor wax a strange comfort. He rarely spoke. And when he did, his voice was a low rumble, devoid of inflection. He kept to himself, a silent, solitary figure, an enigma to the day staff who barely registered his presence. They saw a man who moved slowly, spoke little, and seemed content with his humble, repetitive tasks. They had no idea that beneath the worn jumpsuit and placid demeanor lay the coiled readiness of a former top-tier CIA operative, a man who had once navigated the treacherous currents of international espionage with lethal grace. One unusually busy Tuesday, a late-night coding sprint had left a section of the fourth floor buzzing with activity. John was methodically waxing the floors near the server racks when he noticed a young intern, Sarah Chen, struggling to move a heavy, wheeled server rack across the polished concrete. Her small frame strained, the rack wobbling precariously. Suddenly, one of the wheels snagged on an uneven floor tile. The massive rack, laden with expensive, sensitive equipment, tilted violently, threatening to topple directly onto Sarah. Time seemed to slow for John. His eyes, usually veiled, sharpened to pinpoint focus. The mundane scene morphed into a high-stakes moment, every variable calculated in an instant. Without a sound, without a flicker of hesitation, he lunged. It wasn't the clumsy rush of a janitor. It was the explosive, economical movement of a trained operative. He didn't just push Sarah out of the way. He spun her, safely, behind him with one hand, while his other shot out, catching the edge of the falling server rack with astonishing force. The metal groaned, but the rack stopped its descent, held firmly by John's powerful, steady grip. He then, with a controlled grunt, gently guided it back onto its wheels, as if it weighed no more than a feather. Sarah, breathless and pale, stared at him, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. What was that?" she stammered, looking from the perfectly upright rack to John, whose face had already resumed its blank, unreadable expression. John simply shrugged, his voice a low, gravelly murmur. "Uneven floor. Happens." He then pushed his cart past her, continuing his waxing as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. The few other engineers who had witnessed the near disaster blinked, shivered, and quickly rationalized it away as lucky timing or a strange, almost inhuman reflex. They laughed it off, dismissing the peculiar janitor's actions as a fluke. This small, uncelebrated act of quiet heroism was John's save-the-cat moment, a subtle glimpse into the true capabilities hidden beneath his unassuming facade, ensuring the reader's inherent sympathy for him. Yet, despite his carefully constructed ordinary life, the past was never truly quiet. John was haunted by fragmented dreams, flashes of high-speed chases, the chilling concussive force of explosions, the acrid scent of gunpowder, and the desperate urgency of close-quarters combat. Always. There was a face, partially obscured by shadows or a flash of light, a face he couldn't quite place, yet knew was intrinsically linked to his deepest wounds. He kept a single, tangible link to his former life, a heavy, tarnished military-issue wristwatch, its face scratched, its leather band worn, and tucked away in a hidden compartment within his cleaning cart. A small, wickedly sharp dagger, its blade cool and silent, a testament to the skills he desperately tried to suppress, yet meticulously maintained. This was the seed of mystery, a breadcrumb trail hinting at a tumultuous past and an extraordinary, dormant talent. Mark Harrison, the Chief Operating Officer (COO) of Innovatech, was a man who lived by spreadsheets and efficiency reports. His suits were always impeccably tailored, his hair slicked back, his demeanor one of unyielding, corporate stiffness. Mark valued order, predictability, and above all, productivity. He despised anything that disrupted the smooth operation of his well-oiled machine. He had noticed John Reed, the janitor, long ago, and found his behavior deeply irritating. John's slow movements, his habit of lingering in hallways, his apparent disinterest in small talk. To Mark, these were not eccentricities, but signs of a lack of discipline, a distraction. He saw John as a costly inefficiency, a loose end that needed to be tied up. Mark was antagonist type B, driven by arrogance and rigid preconceptions, viewing John not as a potential threat, but as a low-level irritant, a flaw in his otherwise perfect corporate structure. He believed John was wasting company time and generally being a nuisance, a judgment fueled by his obsession with control and his inability to see beyond the surface. Sarah Chen, the executive assistant to the brilliant and often reclusive CEO, Emily Vance, was a stark contrast to Mark Harrison. She possessed a keen observational mind, honed by years of managing Emily's incredibly complex schedule, and a quiet, compassionate heart. She had witnessed the server rack incident, and unlike the engineers, she hadn't dismissed it. She had seen the raw, almost inhuman speed of John's reaction, the quiet strength in his hands. Sarah often caught John lingering outside Emily's office, or peering intently at security cameras, behaviors that didn't quite fit the profile of a typical janitor. She sensed a hidden depth to the quiet man, a carefully constructed facade that hinted at something far more significant. She was C.J. Znoi Trogyup, the lone empathetic eye in a company blind to the janitor's true purpose, the only one who felt a prickle of unease about Mark's increasingly hostile attitude towards John. She began to subtly observe John, a quiet detective in the polished corporate world, sensing that there was a story far grander than anyone realized unfolding around them. The quiet hum of the Innovatech Solutions headquarters, usually a backdrop to John Reed's solitary shifts, felt different that Tuesday night. A subtle tension, imperceptible to anyone else, prickled at the edges of John's awareness. He was buffing the gleaming marble floors of the executive lobby, his movements deliberate, his senses acutely tuned to every shift in the building's nocturnal rhythm. His mind, however, was miles away, grappling with an encrypted email he'd received hours earlier. It had arrived on a burner phone he kept hidden, a relic from a past he desperately tried to keep buried. The sender was an old contact, a ghost from his former life in the agency, a man known only as Spectre. Spectre was a master of intelligence, a man whose warnings were never to be ignored. The message was terse, devoid of pleasantries, yet chilling in its implication. Threat acquired. CEO Emily Vance. Immediate. Location Innovatech. Trust no one. No details. No assassin's identity. No timeline. Just a stark, urgent red flag waving in the quiet. Corporate air. This was the catalyst, the unwelcome intrusion that violently shattered the fragile peace John had so carefully constructed. John continued polishing the marble, the rhythmic whir of the machine a counterpoint to the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind. He had left the agency 5 years ago, after a mission in Chechnya had gone sideways, leaving him with physical scars and deeper, invisible ones. The echoes of shattered glass, the acrid scent of cordite, the chilling sight of a trusted comrade falling. These were the fragments that haunted his dreams, the unidentifiable face in his nightmares. He had sought anonymity, a life devoid of violence and deception, a quiet existence where the biggest challenge was a stubborn coffee stain. The thought of plunging back into that world, even to save an innocent life, filled him with a profound sense of weariness, a deep-seated reluctance. He craved the simple, mundane existence of John, the janitor. He was a man torn, caught between the yearning for peace and the ingrained, undeniable call of duty. Yet, a fundamental principle, forged in the crucible of his training, tugged at him: protect the innocent. It was a code he had lived by, a moral compass that had never truly rusted, even in retirement. Emily Vance, the visionary CEO of Innovatech, was, as far as he knew, an innocent, a brilliant mind targeted for reasons unknown. The decision, though agonizing, was ultimately clear. He couldn't ignore it. The life he had built, the quiet solitude, it was all secondary to the life he was sworn to protect. This was the initial reaction, the powerful internal conflict between a yearning for tranquility and the reawakening of a dormant, essential instinct. The next day, a small incident occurred that solidified John's resolve, pushing him past the point of no return. Innovatech's cutting-edge AI research lab, usually a fortress of digital security, suffered a minor, yet unsettling, breach. A junior cybersecurity analyst, panicked, reported an attempt to infiltrate their core network from an external IP address, quickly thwarted by the automated defenses. However, unknown to anyone but John, the attempted infiltration was far more sophisticated than a mere amateur hacker. It was a test, a probing attack, a deliberate, low-level probing by a highly skilled entity to gauge the company's digital defenses before a larger, more critical strike. John, while seemingly scrubbing a stain from a nearby wall, had observed the analyst's frantic movements, noted the subtle shifts in the network's energy signature. He'd made a quick, almost imperceptible adjustment to a concealed network router he had installed weeks ago as a precautionary measure, subtly diverting the more dangerous malware into a digital void. His actions were unseen, his intervention unnoticed, but the incident confirmed his gravest fears. The threat was not only real but actively escalating. Later that afternoon, Mark Harrison, COO, called an impromptu meeting about the security lapse. His face was red, his voice sharp with frustration. "This is unacceptable," he fumed, pacing his pristine office. "A blatant attempt to disrupt our operations. We need tighter protocols. And for God's sake, who left that janitor lurking near the server room? Reed, wasn't it?" He glanced at his assistant. "That man is a menace, always in the way, always a distraction." John, hidden in plain sight, supposedly cleaning the glass wall of Mark's office, listened to the COO's rant. The more Mark complained about his disruptive presence, the more John understood the strategic advantage of his unassuming cover. No one, least of all Mark, would suspect the clumsy, quiet janitor of being a highly trained operative. The hack, though seemingly minor to others, was the undeniable confirmation John needed. The game was on. He couldn't go back to his simple life. The threat was inside the building, growing closer. This was the point of no return. He had a mission, a life to protect, and a silent war to wage from the shadows. His past, the very thing he had tried to escape, had caught up with him, reminding him that some battles were simply unavoidable, and some duties unbreakable. The dramatic irony of the situation was a thick, suffocating blanket. The reader knew the true gravity of John's presence, the life-and-death stakes he operated under. Meanwhile, Mark Harrison and the entire Innovatech staff viewed him as nothing more than a peculiar, possibly incompetent janitor. They saw his deliberate movements, his watchful eyes, his occasional blunders not as calculated maneuvers to protect them, but as irritating quirks. Signs of a man who was out of place. A distraction. Every annoyed sigh, every whispered complaint about the weird janitor served only to deepen the painful contrast between perception and reality, heightening the tension and underscoring the formidable challenge John faced to save a life while remaining utterly invisible. The gleaming corporate facade of Innovatech Solutions, with its glass walls and polished steel, belied the intricate, silent war being waged within its confines. For John Reed, the mission was clear: keep CEO Emily Vance alive. But the challenge wasn't just identifying the threat. It was executing his protection detail while maintaining his cover as a humble janitor. This necessitated a delicate dance of calculated blunders and carefully orchestrated incompetence, designed to keep him close to his target without raising suspicion, especially from the ever-watchful Mark Harrison. John knew the assassin would target Emily Vance in a moment of vulnerability, likely when her guard was down, or when security protocols were less stringent. His best bet was to create opportunities to be near her, to observe her routine, and to scout potential threats in her immediate vicinity. This meant abandoning his usual solitary movements. His first distraction came during Emily's morning coffee ritual. Every day at 8 a.m. sharp, Emily would descend to the executive floor's sleek, minimalist kitchenette to brew her artisanal pour-over coffee. It was a brief window of relative privacy, away from her security detail. John, feigning clumsiness, accidentally jostled a cleaning bucket, sending a cascade of soapy water splashing across the already pristine floor, directly in Emily's path. "Oh, my apologies, Ms. Vance," he mumbled, his voice a low, rough murmur, as he quickly moved to mop it up. Emily, a woman of sharp intellect, but little patience for perceived inefficiency, simply sighed, stepping around him with an exasperated look. As he knelt, seemingly focused on the puddle, his eyes darted. He noted the reflection in the polished steel appliances, the subtle hum of the ventilation system, the exact angle of the sunlight streaming through the windows, all potential avenues for a threat. His mind, a complex algorithm of threat assessment, processed every detail. He was a silent guardian, a shadow in plain sight. These daily incidents became a pattern. A misplaced keycard to a crucial server room, necessitating John to find it after Emily frantically searched her desk. A sudden malfunction in the executive floor's climate control, requiring John to spend an hour ostensibly tinkering with the vents near Emily's office. Each action, meticulously planned, was designed to keep him in Emily's orbit. To the outside world, these were proof of John's growing incompetence, his increasing tendency to be a distraction. Mark Harrison, the COO, was rapidly reaching his boiling point. His carefully managed corporate environment was being systematically, if seemingly accidentally, disrupted by one man. He had a meeting with the head of facilities, Mr. Davies, his voice tight with barely suppressed fury. "Davies," Mark hissed, gesturing emphatically with a perfectly manicured hand. "What is going on with Reed? The man is a disaster, lost keycards, spilled coffee in the executive lounge. Now the AC on the CEO's floor is acting up right before her biggest quarterly presentation." Mr. Davies, a mild-mannered man who had never seen John do anything but work diligently, stammered. "Mr. Harrison, John's always been quiet, but reliable. I've never had any complaints until recently." "Well, now you have one," Mark snapped, pounding a fist softly on his desk. "He's a liability, a total distraction. I want him gone. Get rid of him, or at least transfer him to the lowest level, the basement archives, anywhere he can't interfere with critical operations." Mark saw John not just as incompetent, but as an affront to his authority, an uncontrolled variable in his perfectly ordered universe. His impatience was escalating, unknowingly playing directly into John's hands, as it reinforced the illusion of a bumbling janitor. One afternoon, John observed Emily Vance struggling with her phone. She looked frustrated, tapping the screen repeatedly. He knew, from Spectre's earlier warning, that comms were a potential vector for attack. He also knew that a direct request to examine her phone would blow his cover instantly. He needed an accident. As Emily walked past the janitorial cart, engrossed in her phone, John quickly, almost imperceptibly, extended his arm, nudging a loose wheel on the cart. The cart swerved, clipping Emily's hand. Her phone flew from her grasp, skittering across the floor and sliding under a heavy display cabinet. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Reed!" Emily exclaimed, annoyance clear in her voice. "Are you trying to injure me?" "My apologies, Ms. Vance," John said, his voice flat, already dropping to his knees. "I'll get it." He crawled under the cabinet, a difficult, cramped space. Emily sighed, tapping her foot impatiently. Unbeknownst to Emily, or anyone else, John was performing an intricate, almost impossible maneuver in the tight space. His fingers, trained for precision under duress, moved with blinding speed. He retrieved the phone, but in the brief seconds he was out of sight. His thumbs flew across its surface. He detected a sophisticated tracking implant. Not software, but a tiny physical device inserted into the phone's charging port. With a flick of his thumbnail, he dislodged it, crushing the microscopic device between his fingers before emerging. He then subtly replaced the now-clean phone, handed it back to Emily. "Here you go, Ms. Vance. Looks fine." Emily snatched it back. Still annoyed. "It's fine. Reed, just try to be more careful. Please." She walked away, oblivious to the fact that John had just potentially saved her life, or at least her privacy. However, this specific incident had a witness. Sarah Chen, Emily's executive assistant, had been returning from a coffee run. She had seen the phone incident unfold. Unlike Emily, Sarah didn't see an accident. She had a vantage point that allowed her to see John's hand. It wasn't a clumsy nudge. It was too precise, too controlled. And then, when he was under the cabinet, the speed with which he had worked, the almost surgical focus of his movements, even in such a confined space, it had been unnerving. She had also noted the tiny, almost imperceptible flick of his thumb as he emerged. A strange feeling settled in her stomach. John Reed wasn't just incompetent. He was something else entirely. She began to connect the dots: the server rack, the mysterious AC malfunction that kept him near Emily's office, the lost keycards. Everything he did, while appearing to be disruptive, somehow always put him in Emily's proximity. Sarah's suspicions were now fully aroused. She kept her thoughts to herself, but her analytical mind began to work, piecing together the puzzle of the peculiar janitor. This was the unveiling for the Nugoi Trogyup, a controlled exposure of John's true skills, albeit still shrouded in the guise of his cover. The very next day, Mark Harrison acted. He summoned John to his lavish, glass-walled office, the corporate equivalent of a lion's den. Mark sat behind his enormous desk, his face a thundercloud. "Reed," he began, his voice dangerously low. "I've tried to be patient. I've tried to overlook your, eccentricities. But frankly, you are becoming a liability. Your performance is unacceptable. You're a distraction, a drain on company resources, and frankly, you're interfering with critical executive functions." John stood silently, his gaze unblinking, betraying nothing. He knew this was coming. "Consider this your final warning. Reed," Mark continued, his voice rising with each word. "One more incident, one more accident, and I will personally ensure you are terminated. And believe me, I will make sure you never work in this city again. Do I make myself clear?" John simply nodded, his face impassive. "Clear, Mr. Harrison." He turned and walked out, leaving Mark fuming. Mark, however, wasn't done. He had noticed Sarah Chen's subtle, almost imperceptible glances towards John during their brief interactions. He had seen her lingering near John's cleaning cart, trying to engage him in conversation. And Sarah Chen, Mark muttered to himself. She seems to be siding with this menace. I'll need to have a word with her too. Loyalty is paramount at Innovatech. His irritation with John had now extended to Sarah, unknowingly putting his future Ngoy Trog Yup under his suspicious scrutiny. A clear action of the antagonist to sideline anyone who might be sympathetic to John. The noose around John's carefully constructed cover was tightening, the stakes rising with every perceived misstep. The clock on the wall of John Reed's cramped janitorial office ticked with agonizing slowness, each second stretching into an eternity. It was 8:47 a.m. The crucial quarterly board meeting at Innovatech Solutions was set to begin at 9:00 a.m. sharp, on the top floor, in the executive boardroom. This was it, the window, the time. John knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was when the assassin would strike. His encrypted burner phone, vibrating subtly in his pocket, confirmed his worst fears, a new, cryptic message from Spectre. It wasn't a warning this time. It was a terse, almost regretful confirmation of the assassin's presence in the building. Payload inbound, ETA minutes. The executive boardroom, a gleaming expanse of polished mahogany, floor-to-ceiling windows, and expensive ergonomic chairs, was the symbolic Jiao Truong for this impending confrontation. It was a space designed to project power, transparency, and unshakable security. Yet it was precisely this aura of invulnerability that made it the perfect stage for a hidden attack. John had meticulously cased the room over the past few weeks, cataloging every possible entry point, every blind spot, every potential vantage point for a sniper. He knew the building's schematics better than its chief architect. His intel suggested the assassin was a professional, cold and calculating, favoring precision over chaos. This meant a single, clean shot, likely from a distance, or a swift targeted strike within the room itself. The stakes were astronomical. Emily Vance, the CEO, would be at the head of the table, exposed. The entire Innovatech board, a collection of some of the brightest minds in the tech world, would be collateral damage. John had considered calling the police, the FBI, but that was impossible. Revealing his identity, breaking his cover, would compromise the entire operation, potentially alerting the assassin and forcing them to go deeper underground, only to resurface later. More critically, it would put Emily Vance in even greater danger. He had to handle this alone. He couldn't trust anyone in the company with the truth. Not yet. He was a lone wolf, operating in the heart of a well-oiled corporate machine, surrounded by people who saw him as nothing more than a nuisance. This was the crushing weight of his Ko-Jok Kwan Nguoi Hung. Just as John was about to implement his final, desperate plan, the intercom in his janitorial closet crackled to life. It was Mark Harrison's clipped voice, amplified and dripping with annoyance. "Reed, what are you doing loitering in the executive wing? Get down to the ground floor immediately. There's a spill in the cafeteria. And I want you nowhere near the executive floor during the board meeting. You're a distraction we simply cannot afford." Cabananeo. Mark's words were a direct assault on John's mission, a cruel twist of dramatic irony. Mark, completely oblivious to the impending danger, saw John's proximity to the executive floor as a personal affront, another one of John's unacceptable behaviors. He was consciously trying to remove John from the very place he needed to be, unwittingly becoming an obstacle to Emily's survival. John felt a surge of cold fury, but he kept his face impassive. He knew this was a critical moment. He had to bypass Mark's orders without raising suspicion, without losing precious seconds. John had already taken precautionary measures. Days ago, he had subtly manipulated the internal security camera feeds in the executive lounge, creating a carefully looped 5-minute delay for the specific cameras covering the boardroom entrance. This would buy him a crucial window. He had also planted a small, unnoticeable sensor under the boardroom table, connected to a discreet earpiece, allowing him to listen in on the pre-meeting chatter and detect any unusual sounds. He strapped the old military wristwatch tighter on his wrist, its worn face a stark contrast to the sleek, digital world around him. He felt the reassuring weight of his hidden dagger. His mind clicked into operational mode, shedding the disguise of the humble janitor. He was no longer John Reed, the peculiar cleaner. He was the ghost, the protector, the phantom of the agency, ready to move with deadly precision. He exited his closet, pushing his cleaning cart with seemingly casual slowness towards the elevators. He passed a group of young executives, dressed in sharp suits, chatting animatedly, completely oblivious. He saw Sarah Chen, Emily Vance's executive assistant, arranging last-minute refreshments outside the boardroom, her brow furrowed with the usual pre-meeting stress. She glanced at him, a flicker of that knowing curiosity in her eyes, but said nothing. John nodded almost imperceptibly, a silent promise that he was on it. As the elevator doors opened, John paused, feigning a need to adjust a loose wheel on his cart. He subtly scanned the security panel next to the elevator bank. The lights for the executive floor were blinking, indicating multiple keycard entries in rapid succession, the board members arriving. His eyes narrowed. He saw one particular light blink, a restricted access card, one that only high-level personnel could possess. Yet it seemed to flicker with an unusual delay. A cold dread settled in his stomach. The assassin was not just an external threat. They were already inside, disguised, a wolf among the flock. This realization intensified the ap luk toi jian. He didn't have minutes. He had seconds. He pushed the elevator button for the executive floor, knowing full well Mark would be fuming. But the spilled coffee in the cafeteria was a minor incident. A breach of security on the top floor was an existential threat. The elevator ascended, a silent, glass-encased coffin hurtling him towards the inevitable confrontation. He could feel the familiar adrenaline surge, the sharpening of his senses. Every shadow seemed to deepen, every sound to resonate with meaning. The quiet hum of the building was now a prelude to a storm. He was stepping into the maw of the lion, a lone protector against an unknown, unseen enemy, and the world below him, oblivious to the drama unfolding above, continued its placid, everyday routine. The heavy oak doors of the Innovatech executive boardroom, usually a symbol of corporate gravitas, splintered inward with a deafening crash, ripped from their hinges as if struck by a battering ram. Dust and debris exploded into the room, momentarily obscuring the horrified faces of the board members who had just settled in. A chilling silence descended, broken only by the sharp intake of collective breath. Then, a figure emerged from the dust cloud, tall, lean, dressed in a dark, nondescript technician's uniform, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap pulled low. In his gloved hand, a silenced pistol, its barrel unwavering, leveled directly at Emily Vance. The assassin, a professional with cold, dead eyes and the unnerving stillness of a predator, had clearly bypassed the external security with ease. His presence was a stark, terrifying anomaly in the sterile corporate environment. He was not a disgruntled employee, but a ghost from the shadows, an instrument of a larger, unseen power. John Reed, who had managed to slip into the boardroom just moments before the breach, had positioned himself strategically near a heavy credenza, ostensibly adjusting a loose panel. He saw the assassin burst in, saw the gun swing towards Emily, and his mind, trained for countless life-or-death scenarios, processed the immediate threat with terrifying clarity. He saw the gleam of the suppressor, the assassin's precise targeting, the horrified, frozen faces of the board members. He knew Emily Vance, sitting at the head of the table, was a dead woman if he hesitated. This was the bated breath moment, the fraction of a second where life hung in the balance, where everything could, and should, go wrong. The assassin's finger twitched on the trigger. Time warped, slowing to an excruciating crawl. John saw the faint gleam of the bullet about to erupt from the barrel, in an explosive, fluid motion that belied his ordinary janitorial facade. John launched himself forward. It wasn't a run. It was a blur of controlled power. His hand snatched a heavy, ornate crystal vase from the credenza, its weight substantial. with a primal yell that was completely uncharacteristic of the quiet janitor, a guttural sound that momentarily startled the assassin. John hurled the vase with pinpoint accuracy. The projectile spun, glinting under the boardroom lights, and struck the assassin's gun hand with a sickening crunch. The shot still fired, a muffled pop, but the impact sent the bullet wide, embedding itself harmlessly into the wall behind Emily's head, leaving a small, smoking crater. The assassin, his hand now useless, cried out in pain and surprise, dropping the pistol. Before he could react, John was on him. Every movement was a testament to years of brutal, unforgiving training. His body flowed, a blur of practiced precision. He moved low, sweeping the assassin's legs from beneath him with a powerful kick. The man crashed to the ground, winded. John didn't pause. He followed through with a quick, decisive strike to the pressure point behind the assassin's ear, instantly rendering him unconscious. It was brutal, efficient, and utterly devoid of wasted motion. The entire sequence, from the vase throw to the takedown, lasted no more than 5 seconds. It was a perfectly executed unmasking, a revelation of John's true capabilities, witnessed by a room full of stunned, silent executives. The immediate aftermath was a tableau of frozen shock. The board members, who moments ago were discussing quarterly profits, sat rigid, their eyes wide with disbelief, staring first at the unconscious assassin, then at John Reed, the janitor, who stood over him, breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his face stark with grim determination. Emily Vance, who had instinctively ducked when the doors exploded, slowly raised her head, her hand pressed to her chest. She looked at the smoking hole in the wall, then at the unconscious assailant, and finally, her gaze settled on John. Her eyes, usually shrewd and composed, were now filled with a mixture of terror, confusion, and dawning awe. The mild-mannered janitor had just saved her life. Mark Harrison, the COO, had been standing near the projection screen, mid-sentence about budget forecasts. He had watched the entire horrifying scene unfold, frozen in place. His carefully constructed world of spreadsheets and corporate hierarchy had just been violently shattered. The man he had so vehemently dismissed as a distraction, the incompetent janitor he had threatened to fire, had just single-handedly thwarted an assassination attempt. Mark's face, usually flushed with annoyance, was now ashen, his jaw slack. The smug contempt had been replaced by utter, profound astonishment. Then a deep, sickening realization of his own gross misjudgment. He stared at John, seeing for the first time not a jumpsuit-clad nuisance, but a formidable, lethal protector. Sarah Chen, Emily's executive assistant, had been the first to process what had truly happened. She had seen John's preternatural calm before the doors blew, had seen the surgical precision of his movements as he approached the credenza. When the vase flew, she had gasped, then watched with breathless wonder as John, the quiet janitor, transformed into a blur of raw, controlled power. Her earlier suspicions about him, the quiet questions in her mind, solidified into certainty. He was exactly who she thought he might be, a hero, hiding in plain sight. Her face, initially pale with fear, now glowed with a mixture of relief, vindication, and profound admiration. The silence eventually broke. A low murmur rippled through the room, quickly escalating into a cacophony of gasps, exclamations, and frantic questions. Someone stumbled forward to check the assassin. Another pulled out a phone, shaking, to call 911. John, however, remained calm. He secured the assassin's arms with zip ties he had retrieved from his cleaning cart, a subtle reminder of his prepared state. He then retrieved the silenced pistol, handling it with the practiced ease of someone who understood its deadly mechanics intimately. The reactions of the witnesses were a powerful testament to John's vindication. The initial shock gave way to a surge of pure, unadulterated awe. Board members, pillars of the corporate world, whispered amongst themselves, their voices filled with a bewildered respect. The man they had collectively overlooked, scoffed at, and actively tried to sideline had just proven himself to be their savior. Their faces, transformed from a mixture of skepticism and indifference to outright wonder, were the ultimate validation of John's hidden worth. The janitor, a figure of scorn and amusement, had emerged as an unlikely hero, his actions speaking volumes where his words had always been few. The true value of John Reed had finally been unveiled, not through boastful declaration, but through a breathtaking display of raw courage and unmatched skill. The cacophony of sirens pierced the pristine silence of the Innovatech executive floor, growing louder with each passing second, a stark contrast to the earlier, terrifying quiet. Police tactical units swarmed the boardroom, their movements precise and practiced, swiftly securing the unconscious assassin and collecting evidence. The board members, still reeling from the shock, were ushered out to provide statements, their faces a mixture of lingering fear and astonished relief. In the midst of the controlled chaos, John Reed stood calmly, his janitor's uniform a strange anomaly amidst the flashing lights and serious faces of law enforcement. The assassin, once revived, was identified as a highly skilled operative of the Scorpion Syndicate, a notoriously ruthless international crime organization. Their objective, as later revealed by the police and FBI, was to destabilize Innovatech, steal its cutting-edge AI technology, and then seize control of the company through hostile means. Emily Vance's assassination was merely the first, brutal step in their takeover. The revelation sent a cold shiver through the corporate world, confirming the profound danger from which John had just saved them. This was the deserved downfall of the villain, the exposure of the true, sinister forces at play. As the immediate crisis subsided, Mark Harrison, the COO, finally approached John. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a profound, palpable shame. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes cast down. "Reed," he began, his voice barely a whisper, thick with regret. I don't know what to say. I was so wrong about you. So completely, utterly wrong." He looked up, his gaze meeting John's, and for the first time, John saw genuine humility in the man's eyes. You saved us all. You saved Emily. And all this time, I was trying to get you fired. I was calling you a distraction. I don't know how I could have been so blind. So stupid." He extended a trembling hand. "Please, John, my deepest apologies. And I want to offer you anything. Anything you want. A position on the executive team. Head of security. Anything at all. You deserve it." Mark's public apology and his obvious distress were his moment of misunderstood person's remorse, a stark acknowledgement of his profound error in judgment. John simply looked at Mark, his expression unreadable. He considered the offer, a high-ranking corporate security job, the kind of role that appealed to his training, but also the very kind of public role he had sought to avoid. He shook Mark's hand, a silent acceptance of the apology. But then he slowly shook his head. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison, but that's not why I was here." Later, in the quiet solitude of Emily Vance's executive office, after the police had left and the shock began to wear off, John finally revealed his true identity. Emily, still shaken but remarkably composed, listened intently as John, for the first time in years, dropped his janitor facade entirely. His voice, though still soft, carried the authority of his past life as he explained his former role in the CIA, the coded email, Spectre's warning, and the silent, weeks-long operation to protect her. He explained his deep-seated reasons for choosing a life of anonymity, the trauma of his past missions. Emily listened, her brilliant mind piecing together the subtle clues she'd overlooked, the pieces of John's peculiar behavior that now made terrifying sense. When he finished, she sat in silence for a long moment, simply looking at him, a man who had silently, selflessly risked everything for her. "John," she finally said, her voice filled with a profound gratitude, I I don't know how to thank you. You gave up your peace for my safety." She paused, then her eyes, sharp and visionary, lit up with an idea. "You said you needed to stay out of the public eye. You said you want to continue protecting people, but on your own terms. Innovatech is building the future. We develop technology that can change the world, but also technology that needs protection. How about this? I want to create a new division. Head of Global Security Systems and Strategic Defense. It would be a highly classified internal role. You'd report directly to me. You'd have unparalleled resources, a dedicated team, and complete autonomy to build the most advanced defense systems against threats like the one we just faced. You wouldn't be in the public spotlight. You'd be working from the shadows, just as you prefer, but with a purpose that truly matters, using your unique skills to protect innovation itself." This was John's new opportunity, a tailor-made role that perfectly balanced his need for anonymity with his inherent duty to protect. It was a chance to leverage his extraordinary skills in a meaningful way, not just for financial gain, but to contribute to a cause that resonated deeply with his moral compass. It was a pathway to redemption for his past, allowing him to prevent future tragedies without returning to the destructive, public life he had once inhabited. That evening, as dusk settled over the city, John sat with Sarah Chen in a quiet corner of the still buzzing lobby, waiting for the last of the police to clear out. Sarah had been one of the first to witness his true capabilities, and her silent support had not gone unnoticed. "So," Sarah said, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips, "the janitor was actually, a ninja?" John offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile in return, a rare glimpse of humor. "Something like that." He sighed, the last of the day's adrenaline slowly dissipating. It's a difficult life, Sarah. The shadows, the constant vigilance, the things you see, it changes you." Sarah nodded, her expression earnest. "I can only imagine. But John, what you did today, it was truly heroic. And seeing Mark, how he reacted, it just goes to show, you never really know what someone's carrying inside, do they, or what they're capable of." She looked at him, her eyes soft with understanding. "You're a good man, John. A genuinely good man. And I think it's time you stopped hiding that." John looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle, a vast, complex tapestry of lives and secrets. "Perhaps," he murmured, a flicker of something akin to hope in his eyes. This contemplative dialogue was a quiet, profound moment, a shared understanding that transcended their previous roles. It wasn't just about his new job, it was about the beginning of healing, the possibility of allowing himself to be seen, truly seen, by those who genuinely cared, and finding peace in a life that was still dedicated to duty, but now, a duty of his own choosing. 2 years later, the Seattle skyline had gained a new, distinctive feature, the subtly glowing, multi-tiered Innovatech campus, a testament to its continued global dominance in technological innovation. Within its gleaming core, on the strategically secured 30th floor, John Reed, no longer the peculiar janitor, but the revered head of global security systems and strategic defense, found a peace he hadn't known existed since before his agency days. He was still a man of quiet intensity, but the haunted look in his eyes had softened, replaced by a quiet confidence. His days were spent not scrubbing floors, but orchestrating the digital and physical defense of Innovatech's revolutionary advancements, often collaborating directly with government agencies on counterterrorism tech. He had found his purpose, a balance between his innate duty to protect and the anonymity he still preferred. Innovatech had indeed become one of the safest companies globally, not just because of its formidable digital firewalls, but because of John's meticulous, multi-layered physical security protocols. He had built a team of ex-military and intelligence operatives, each as dedicated and discreet as himself, creating an impenetrable shield around Emily Vance and her groundbreaking work. Emily, recognizing John's unique genius, granted him full autonomy, trusting his instincts implicitly. Their professional relationship had blossomed into one of deep mutual respect, rooted in the shared experience of that terrifying day in the boardroom. But John's commitment extended beyond corporate walls. His past, once a source of deep pain, had become a wellspring of compassion. He knew the struggle of returning veterans, of intelligence officers grappling with the transition to civilian life, carrying unseen burdens and possessing invaluable skills that often went unutilized. Thus, he founded Project Sentinel, a discreet, Innovatech-backed mentorship program. Operating quietly, often under the radar, it provided training, counseling, and employment opportunities to veterans and former intelligence personnel, helping them channel their specialized skills into meaningful civilian careers within Innovatech's burgeoning security and R&D divisions. It was John's way of paying it forward, a silent legacy built on his own difficult journey, ensuring others found purpose and belonging where he once thought he would find only isolation. Sarah Chen, now Emily's chief of staff and a key liaison for Project Sentinel, was a constant, supportive presence in John's new life. Her sharp intellect and empathetic nature made her an indispensable partner, helping navigate the complexities of corporate bureaucracy and human need. She had witnessed John's transformation firsthand, from the enigmatic janitor to the quiet hero, and their bond was one of profound trust and understanding. She often reminded him of the impact he was having, not just on the company, but on the lives of the men and women Project Sentinel touched. One crisp autumn evening, John found himself on the rooftop garden of the Innovatech Tower, a tranquil oasis he had designed specifically for quiet reflection. The setting sun cast long, golden shadows across the Seattle skyline, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The city hummed below, a symphony of progress and peace that he had helped secure. He wasn't alone. Sarah joined him, a warm cup of coffee in her hands. Another successful week. Chief, she said softly, handing him the mug. John took a sip, the warmth spreading through him. And another group of Sentinels graduated. Johnson from Special Forces. He's already integrating well into the cyber threat assessment team. Sarah smiled. They look up to you, John. They see what you've built, what you've overcome. You're more than just their boss. You're their hope. John looked out at the vast urban sprawl, the lights beginning to twinkle like scattered diamonds. The face that had haunted his dreams for so long, the obscured figure from his past, no longer tormented him. Instead, he saw the faces of the Sentinels, the young engineers he protected, the innocent lives he safeguarded. He saw Emily, innovating fearlessly, and Sarah, a steadfast ally. He saw the city, vibrant and alive. The echoes of his duty were no longer a burden, but a purpose. He was no longer running from the past. He was building a future, a silent guardian in a world that needed his vigilant care. His presence, once a distraction, was now the very essence of protection. As the last rays of sunlight faded, plunging the city into the soft embrace of twilight, John stood tall, a sentinel against the encroaching darkness, his eyes reflecting the shimmering lights below, a powerful, silent guardian of peace. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.